Tang dynasty between 618 and 907, starting with Emperor Gazu, followed by Emperor Taizong, crowned in 626. Being considered one of the greatest rulers, a wise man and a good military strategist, a man open to advice. The Li family founded the dynasty, seizing power during the decline and collapse of the Sui Empire. The Tang Empire was one of the most durable empires from this region. In this period, the development of production led to the growth of Chinese economy. The work of the peasants, the production of goods, and the stability made the base for the Tang feudal economy. Among agriculture and other forms of production, the commerce developed too. The Grand Canal united the great rivers of China and was crossed by many vessels transporting skin, cattle, silk, paper, ceramics, and other important goods. Also, external commerce developed. Exotic products like cotton, crystals, spices from India, Indonesia, Korea, Japan, and other places entered the Chinese markets. Hundreds of caravans traveled on old and new trade roads to Manchuria, India, and even in the west through the Caspian Sea and Persia. With other kingdoms and empires, relations existed, so it seems diplomacy was very important to them.
Around between the 3rd and 5th century BC, Confucius's works were collected into the Analects, a collection of sayings written down by his followers. Some of the morals Confucius taught are easily recognizable, most notably his version of the Golden Rule: do not do unto others what you don't want done to yourself. But some of them also sound very strange or old-fashioned to modern ears, especially to Western ones. But we need his advice all the more for this. It serves as an antidote to the troubles we currently face. Here are a few examples of what Confucius helps us to remember. 1. Ceremony is important. The Analects are filled with strange conversations between Confucius and his disciples, like this one. Tse Kung wished to do away with the offering of a sheep. Confucius said, "Tse, you love the sheep, I love the ceremony." At first this is baffling, if not also humorous. Why not save the sheep? But Confucius is reminding Tse and us about the importance of ceremony. In the modern world, we tend to shun ceremony and see this as a good thing, a sign of intimacy or a lack of pretension. But Confucius believed in the value of ceremonies over sheep because he valued what he called ritual propriety. This might seem a very outdated and conservative idea, but in fact many of us long for particular rituals. That meal Mum cooked for us whenever we were sick, or the yearly birthday outing, or our wedding vows. We understand that certain premeditated, deliberate and precise gestures stir our emotions deeply. Rituals make our intentions clear, and they help us to understand how to behave. 2. We should treat our parents with reverence. In particular, Confucius had a very strict idea about how we should behave towards our parents. He believed that we should obey them when we're young, care for them when they're old, mourn at length when they die, and make huge sacrifices in their memory thereafter. He even said that we shouldn't travel far away while our parents are alive, and should cover for them if they steal a sheep. This attitude is known as filial piety. This sounds strange now, when many of us leave our parents' home as teenagers and rarely return to visit. We may even see them as strangers, arbitrarily thrust upon us by fate. After all, our parents are so out of touch, so pitifully human in their shortcomings, so difficult, so judgmental, and they have such bad taste in music. Yet Confucius recognized that in many ways moral life begins in the family. We cannot truly be caring, wise, grateful and conscientious unless we remember Mum's birthday and meet Dad for lunch.
Under the Tang dynasty, which is considered one of the high points of Chinese civilization, Buddhism is really able to take hold, especially in the early Tang dynasty. However, as we get into the late Tang dynasty, Buddhism starts to get some pushback and even gets persecuted to some degree. People arguing that, hey, Buddhism it's a foreign belief system. In some ways, it's not concerned enough with social cohesion. It's all about the individual through meditation trying to separate themselves from reality, becoming one with the emptiness. And so at around the same time, some would argue in reaction to the strength of Buddhism, you have a movement known as Neo-Confucianism, taking the central ideas of Confucius, but using some frameworks and terminology from Taoism and Buddhism. And there were many Neo-Confucian philosophers that began to emerge in the late Tang dynasty, but it's really considered the Sung dynasty where Neo-Confucianism really takes hold. And the most famous of the Neo-Confucian philosophers, sometimes ranked second to Confucius himself in terms of influence on Chinese philosophy, is Zhu Si. He lived from 1130 to 1200, and he's most known for his, one could say, curation of Confucian texts. He famously curated the 4 books, Analects of Confucius, Mencius, or The Mencius, by Mencius, Great Learning, Doctrine of the Mean, written by Confucian followers. This curation of Confucian thought, shortly after Zhu Si's life, it becomes the bedrock of the Chinese education system and the civil service examinations as we go through the Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties, all the way to the early 20th century. Now, he also wrote books on tradition and rituals, which are in some ways very Confucian because they're focused on the practical, they're focused on the family, they're focused on social cohesion. But he also dabbled in the more spiritual.
After the collapse of the Tang dynasty, over 50 years of chaos followed, until a military general named Zhao Kuang-yin founded the Song dynasty, reigning as Emperor Taizu. The Song dynasty started in the year 960 AD and lasted for over 300 years. It can be split into 2 periods, the Northern Song, starting in the year 960, and then after the north was invaded by Jurchen tribes in the year 1127 AD, the Southern Song. When Emperor Taizu came to power, he expanded the civil service examination system and oversaw a project to map the entire empire. The Song saw the revival of Confucianism and a greater prominence of the scholar official class. But the Song wasn't as strong militarily as its Tang dynasty predecessor. It couldn't establish itself as the dominant power in Asia. Thus, the Northern Song period was marked by frequent battles with neighboring kingdoms. These would eventually culminate in the Jurchen tribe to the north invading the Song and conquering the capital Kaifeng in the year 1127 AD. They then set up the Jin dynasty in the north of China. So the Song dynasty moved south, and despite losing a large amount of territory, the Southern Song period was one of prosperity, with flourishing art and culture as well as technological advancements. During the Song, the government started to grant farmers ownership of land, which led to a huge increase in rice production. The economy started to change from a purely agricultural economy to a commercial one, with peasants selling their surpluses to buy a wide range of goods, such as tea, coal, oil, and wine. With the growth in the economy, so grew the population, hitting 100 million by the year 1100 AD. 3 of China's 4 great inventions originate from the Song dynasty, namely printing, the magnetic compass, and gunpowder. The Song government used its printing techniques for currency production, and in the 12th century became the first government in the world to print paper money. The Song was also the first Chinese dynasty to establish a permanent standing navy, to safeguard foreign trade and guard against invasions from the north. The ships used the newly invented compass to navigate and used gunpowder in their weaponry. Gunpowder was first employed in bombs delivered from ships via catapult. The Song used these tactics to successfully defend their territory against Jurchen invasion on the Yangtze River in the year 1161 AD. A Song force of only 3,000 men on 120 ships defeated a Jurchen force of 70,000 on over 600 ships. Yet these technological advancements did not allow the Song to take back the north. This was due to the rise of several powerful states in the region, and the fact that enemies often managed to kidnap Song craftsmen who were then forced to manufacture the technology for the enemy. This lack of military power was alarming to Song scholars and officials, who felt a need to preserve Chinese culture from potential extinction, and thus started to reject any foreign influences. A revival of Confucianism was seen as the best way to achieve this. When the likelihood of regaining the north seemed remote, the Southern Song scholars gave a lot of attention to how Confucian principles could be applied to society rather than to politics. They proposed ways to build a better society, focusing on families and communities.
When it comes to state building, the Song rulers knew what they were doing. Building on the innovations of the Tang dynasty, the Song emperors would build a state structure that would last well over 1,000 years. And here's what that state structure looked like. They divided oversight of that state into 6 departments: personnel, finance, rights, army, justice, and public works. And then overseeing all of these departments was the censorate, who made sure that no one in these bureaucratic departments was behaving like a turd. And if they were behaving like a turd, they got flushed.
The fate of the dynasty was even beyond the control of Song officials and the emperor, for a new power was rising in Asia: the Mongols. Led by Genghis Khan, the Mongols started wars with the Xia and Jin dynasties to the north of the Song in 1205 AD. Initially, the Song formed an alliance and aided the Mongols in invading the Jin in 1232 AD. After 2 years of war, the Jin fell. Yet when Song forces took back their old capital Kaifeng, as well as Chang'an and Luoyang, the Mongols broke the alliance. The Mongols, led by Kublai Khan, started their assault on the Song, and in 1271 AD, Kublai declared the creation of a new dynasty, the Yuan. The last strongholds of Song resistance were crushed in 1279 AD, and the dynasty came to an end. Although the Song was destroyed, the dynasty succeeded in protecting Chinese culture, and particularly Confucian values. The scholar Zhu Xi's commentaries on the Confucian classics form the basis of the imperial examinations from not long after the Song dynasty ended until their abolishment in 1905. Song dynasty landscape paintings are now displayed in museums across the world, and the free inventions of printing, the compass, and gunpowder, whether for better or worse, have played a large role in shaping the world as we know it today. Chinese culture survived through the period of Mongol rule and went on to flourish in the great Ming and Qing dynasties that followed.